Doom 2016 2 couldn't have come at a better time. Mother Earth has finally decided to try and wipe us out in March 2020 with COVID-19, and I've been stuck indoors working from home. And may I say that I am eternally grateful for this, as Doom 2016 was my surprise favourite game of that year, so it's great that it's getting a follow-up. I was born in the mid-90s, you see, so Doom kind of passed me by, as when people were being blown away by the original, I was floating around inside my dad's left bollock, just sort of waiting to eventually squirt it out into the world. Around the same time my mum and dad's lives went downhill, actually. But anyway, FPS only meant two things to me growing up: Call of Duty and Halo. As much as I enjoyed them as a kid, if you asked me to boot up either now, especially COD, I would probably actually do the work I'm supposed to be doing instead. I got turned off from shooters as I found open world games and RPGs as I grew older, where the world was my oyster and I could get lost in a landscape that rolled out in every direction. And as much as I do enjoy my games to have the action that, say, Call of Duty can give me, I prefer that action not to be funneled down a corridor with a butt of a gun shoved halfway into my fucking face.
Let's go. Get in! Get it!
Oh shit,
no, Jack, just get in. Jack, just get in. Jack, just get in.
Get in! I can't.
Jack, just get in! Jack! Just get in!
I'm coming. I can't get in. Wait for me. Oh no, don't wait for me. Oh, I couldn't get in. It only gave me the option to fucking revive you.
Oh my god, that's so stupid.
Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
Halo I could probably go back to, admittedly. Up to reach, I mean, I'm not insane. But that's mainly due to my school year nostalgia. And COD Warzone is tolerable when you have friends around you that you can wind up with annoy.
Don't leave me. Oh, ignore Steve. Bye. It's fine, we'll buy you back in.
Why?
I feel kind of bad for Steve. Should we go back? Oh, okay.
Why? Mission failed. We'll get them next time.
But the shooter truly had lost some of that magic the genre used to hold for me. I assume that my taste just changed as I got older. I still play games that were technically first-person shooters in genres like RPGs and the ever hard to pin down genre of immersive sim, and still enjoy the mechanics of shooting the bad men until they drop down for a little nap. But the FP is much more prominent than the S in these games. I mean, if anyone tries to convince you that Skyrim is a shooter, get them help. Serious medical help. So, anyway, it had been a really long time since I'd sat down and enjoyed a first-person shooter, where shooting was the thing I was actually there for, until Doom 2016 came out. For gamers older than myself, it was a nostalgic blast from the past. For me, it was just what the FPS genre needed to get me back in, and I'm pleased to say that Doom Eternal has only left me wanting more. But for one of this year's hottest releases has come a question I was not really expecting to see debated as much as I have seen it be. Don't get me wrong, it's not being shouted from the rooftops, but there is chatter about it. Which game is better was the inevitable question. Of course, it's a sequel and there's an original, people always debate that stuff. But the thing that made me want to waste my time making this video was the question of which one is more Doom? It's an interesting one, because fundamentally these games look very similar from the outside. I started all that guff about me being a sperm when the original came out, as it's important for understanding my viewpoint for this video. That viewpoint coming from me, some English twat who's fairly new to killing demons and has not been doing it for years and years ever since the original, like I'm sure a lot of you have. With this in mind, I thought it best to look into what Doom is for this video, and I get why people discuss it. I mean, the original idea for Doom 4 was a modern military shooter, and even the developers agreed to stop producing that because ultimately that just didn't feel like Doom. So that feeling you get from playing Doom is important then, to developers as well as the players. So why is this being discussed at all? Well, I think it's because even though both games are about killing demons with a plethora of guns and having a full rug of hair pop up on your chest out of pure testosterone the game pumps into you, they are actually quite different. Doom 2016's idea, after canning the military shooter style, was to capture the original Doom's feel while simultaneously bring it up to the modern age. They succeeded in this, as Doom 2016 really does feel like the original, but better in many ways. I played the original to get footage for this video shortly after replaying 2016, and yeah, there's no denying that it feels a lot more like 2016 than it does Eternal. So if feeling like Doom literally means feeling like the original to you, then yeah, it's no contest, as 2016 was this idea incarnate after all. But Eternal was not looking to emulate the original Doom. That job was already accomplished, so instead they looked to what they could add to the experience to make an entirely new beast, while still trying to remain faithful to what fans love about the series. Now, whether they succeeded or not is going to come down to taste. I would say that yes, they did, as I actually really enjoyed the game and I loved the direction they took. But that's not the reaction everyone's going to have. It completely depends on what you're looking for from a Doom game. So, let's dive further into both games and see if we can find out why, even though the games share so much, they can feel so different to each other. Before we start, I'm going to drop a slight spoiler warning here. I'm not going to show too much of either game, or go into the story too much. But I know there are people out there who like to go into playing these games completely blind, so yeah, here's your chance to drop out the video if that's you. Without further ado, here's Doom vs Doom.
Attempting to acquire the Hell Priest signal.
Nearly 60% of our planet has been consumed by the invaders.
We have the Hell Priest signal locked in. The target is marked, but the signal will not hold for long.
For it is he that they fear, not man, or his armies. They fear the mark of the beast.
The biggest difference between the two games can be felt straight away in the first missions of both, especially playing one after the other like I've done for this dumpster fire video. Playing now some of the encounters found in the first mission of 2016. If you've played Eternal recently and not gone back to 2016, I wonder if you'll think to yourself what I thought, which is where the fuck are all the enemies? Now don't get me wrong, there are still a lot of enemies in this area. If Doom Wicked is to be believed, there's actually over 100 enemies in this one level, which is nothing to be scoffed at, so there's still plenty of spam sandwiches to be made from the meat flying off all these enemies. But a quick comparison to Eternal will show that so much more is thrown at you, even in the starting level. For example, here's a segment from the first mission in Eternal. This shot is of an area you can walk through if you wanted to. It's not even one of the arena-like fights to participate in, and there is 10 enemies on screen, with 3 varieties of enemies, each with different mechanics and best ways to kill. That's another thing that's already so different in Eternal as well. In 2016 there are 3 enemies to face in the first level, whereas in Eternal there's 6. That's double the amount of variety, and each of these enemies have more varied mechanics as well. The 3 enemy varieties in 2016 are all fairly similar to fight, the main difference being that the enemies have different speeds or range or melee attacks, but effectively every enemy in 2016's first level are just fodder. And those 3 enemy types are largely unchanged here in the sequel, but the other 3... First off, we've got fucking spider brains over here, with a weak point that needs to be shut off, because otherwise they're going to fill you full of lead. Then, there are those adorable flying meatballs with teeth that you can deal with by using a nice grenade-shaped pill that they take once daily, washed down with a nice glass of Chlorokill animation. And finally the worms, they're just absolute cunts. Seriously, they pop out and you shoot them, that's their mechanic. But as the games go on, and especially if you play on high difficulties, you'll just refer to them as cunts, as they do a lot of damage fast and they're really fucking annoying. These extra minions are fine to deal with on their own, but they can pile on the pressure during the arena combat that these games are known for. Speaking of which, these fights are much faster and more aggressive in Eternal. Just to hammer home what I mean, this is a Gornis in 2016's second mission. This is what the game consists mainly of, a high concentration of enemies being thrown at you in an enclosed area. Now this is a similar encounter from Doom Eternal's first level. It is in these moments that I believe you can see the biggest difference between the two games and what they are trying to accomplish. Doom's combat is often described to be like a dance of death, where you are in constant movement and everything you do is reacting to your partner. Your partner in this case being a snarling horror from hell, but still the dance metaphor works, so let's just go with it. Doom 2016 gives you less enemies, which can sound like a bad thing. After all, you're the Doom Slayer. You want to be slaying Doom as often as you can. You have that daily quota to fill after all. But having less enemies on screen at one time does allow for you to react to the movements and attacks of the enemies a lot easier, as you can clearly tell who you're up against. For example, with the Pinky, you know you need to get behind them and acquaint their arsehole with the end of your double barrel. And in 2016, even though it's still surrounded by enemies, there are less things to have to react to, and the lack of enemies surrounding you and constantly spawning back in means you can deal with one thing at a time, and learn the best way to deal with this ballroom of murder. This adds to that feeling of being an unstoppable killing machine that the Doom games are all about, as when you figure out the best way to take out all these enemies whilst barely scratching your armour in the process, it really does make you feel like you're a kind of hard bastard who goes out in the middle of winter in a tank top, and his nipples don't even get hard. Eternal has upended this somewhat with its more aggressive enemy spawning and lack of ammo drops. There is constant fodder enemies spawning, and sure, you know what to do with them and how to dodge their attacks, because at the end of the day they are only fodder for you. But the sheer amount of enemies on screen at any one time does dramatically change the way you are moving to the rhythm of this death cha-cha slide. Eternal's combat makes the dance more like a waltz with a dramatic switch to the foxtrot, or simultaneously moving on to 2 rounds with the hokey pokey. Okay, I've tortured the dance metaphor a lot now, but you catch my drift. This change in direction for the combat is shown really early on through the chainsaw. In 2016 you don't even see the chainsaw until Mission 2, whereas in Eternal it's like the second thing you pick up, and that's because it's way more important now. You could carry way more ammo in 2016 at any given time, and the ammo fairy had been very busy littering every nook and cranny of ammo in all the arenas and areas in between. The chainsaw was also an ammo pickup and allowed you to kill demons for more ammo, but it was limited by how much fuel, chainsaw ammo, you brought into the fight and how much was in the arena to be found. You would not rely on the chainsaw solely to keep you in fights, and if you did ever run out of ammo, you could always use the infinite ammo pistol. Which was dog shit, let's be honest, but there you go, it was there. Eternal, however, does not allow the Slayer to carry as much ammo at any given time, and although the ammo fairy is still working overtime on those ammo drops, the fact that you can carry less and the enemies in the game can now take more of a beating means that you're constantly running low or completely running out of ammo, and you cannot rely solely on the ammo found in the arenas anymore. This facilitates the change in how the chainsaw works in Eternal. The chainsaw can now always regenerate 1 charge, so that there is always a way to get more ammo. And as the game has more limited ammo allowance for the player and less ammo laying around, it means it has to spawn fodder demons constantly to make sure you always have ammo to fight with. On one hand, this is great, as it helps with that demon killing quote I mentioned earlier. It also helps sell how much of a killing machine the Doomslayer actually is, as the main mechanic to help you keep fighting these demons is to kill more demons. Also, it means the pistol can fuck off. But these changes aren't perfect. If you like the original game's flow of killing demons, then you may dislike this change quite a lot, frankly. As I said earlier, the demons are a bit more bullet spongy this time as well, meaning your weapons can feel less powerful. Luckily, to compensate for this, huge chunks of flesh do fly off the enemy with every hit now, which is metal as fuck, but you may still dislike that your arsenal is less effective this time around. And because you can always get ammo, it means id can add a lot of annoying enemies to every encounter, as you'll always have the ammo needed to deal with them. Now, annoying enemy types are annoying. It's in the name, to be honest. But they are integral to the experience. They add challenge to the game, and keep the experience fresh, as you can't go in with whatever weapons you want and start shooting like you could in 2016. In 2016, I think you can stick to mostly the same weapons for every fight, without needing to swap to any other weapons, as they all did the job. Whereas in Eternal, due to things like weak points and lack of ammo, you will find yourself changing weapons way more often. These changes do make the game more challenging as well, as when I went back to 2016, I was surprised at how easy it was at the start when compared to the sequel, as in Eternal there's just shit everywhere to deal with, at all times. Even from the beginning. I'm not saying that 2016 doesn't amp up, it definitely does, but not to the same degree as it does in Eternal. Eternal's fights are more intense, with more demons on screen, and this works because of the changes to ammo pickups, as we've already discussed, but also because of the movement the Slayer now has. I mean, he can fling himself around on poles like the world's bulkiest trapeze artist, and luckily for him, the people of Earth, somewhere along the lines, decided that grav lifts are the perfect way to get around, so now there's shit tons of them, which expands greatly on the verticality found in the first game. There's also now a double dash that Doomslayer can use, which lets him zip around even faster. And all this added movement means you can reliably dodge all the extra damage being thrown at you in this game. I think this added speed is incredibly fun, and it adds a lot to the variety of the fights in the game. But at this point, every time the Slayer stops, he could put in a claim for fucking whiplash. Christ, if I make him faster in the sequel to this game, I assume the title being Doom Eternally Infinite Forever, you can have that one for free, Id. Then the Slayer is going to end up travelling through time, trying to make sure his parents get together at the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. The added speed is not the only new addition, however. The Doomslayer now has extra tools in his utility belt of destruction. He has a cryo grenade that allows you to freeze demons and smash them into a million tiny frozen pieces, a grenade launcher that carries 2 shots for when you want to make even more demons into smears of blood on the floor, the flame belch, which allows you to set demons on fire, causing them to sweat armour out of every pore apparently, and the blood punch, which is where the Slayer throws a meaty swing wearing a mighty gauntlet, which either turns enemies into demon jam or smashes away their armour, leaving them open for the Doomslayer to do his thing. Now, all of this sounds awesome, and that's because it is. But this new gameplay is not without its drawbacks. If I can circle back to the start of this comparison, I said that it depends on what you want from Doom that makes this a good entry in the series or not. 2016 may be easier in comparison to Eternal, at least in my opinion, but that does not make it lesser in any way. In fact, if I was looking for a game to relax and sit back and enjoy, I would probably rather boot up 2016 than Eternal. On the flip side, that doesn't make Eternal shit, and it doesn't mean that I hate it. It's just a game that demands your attention at all times, as there is a layer of complexity to killing the demons in this game that is not there in 2016. The sequel is as much about killing demons as it is strategically dissecting an encounter, and knowing what to use and when to use it to keep you alive in the fight, rather than running through the horde, guns blazing, making every demon's khakis pants in fear. Instead of your only fault being rip and tear, as it was in 2016, it is now rip and tear. when I have full armour from using Flame Belch, and my Frost Grenade Blood Punch combo up to get my health back. Oh, and the Chainsaw ready to replenish my ammo. And this cycle goes on and on. You could say the cycle is infinite. Eternal does have a higher skill ceiling because of all this, but I think it does lose some of that appeal that's found in Doom 2016's combat. 2016 is more simplistic, yes, but it can be argued to be more fun because of that. You don't have to plan out your attack, you have one plan and it's the same in every encounter, and that plan is to walk in and fuck shit up. And sure, it has a slower start, but as much as I was praising the sequel earlier for how much it throws at you, that's from my perspective having just played Eternal and now having played through it again for this video. I already knew what I was doing. My first time through, I was getting my arse handed to me every 5 seconds. I think there is such a thing as too much too fast, and I think Eternal may be exactly that for a lot of people. The game is asking, are you good enough, incredibly early? And for some, especially newcomers to the series, I imagine this could be quite alienating. You're supposed to be this demon killing machine, and instead you're being killed on the first level, over and over again. You could say that your suffering was never ending. Doom 2016 instead takes its time and slowly builds up the chaos, and for some I think it's going to be the more enjoyable approach. So why is Eternal's combat so different to 2016's? Well, I recently watched no-clip documentaries on the making of Doom 2016 and the enemies of Doom Eternal, and they're fantastic, you should go and watch them. But having watched that, a lot of why Eternal is the way it is makes so much sense to me now. Everyone at id talks about Doom being about push-forward combat, and Eternal is 100% a continuation of that idea from 2016. If in every circumstance id wants the answer to be push forward, then Eternal's changes make a lot of sense. Added speed allows you to push forward faster, regenerating chainsaw ammo allows you to push forward to get ammo back. Everything about this game has more pushing forward than 2016 does. Hugo Martin, the director of both games, also talks about how he searched for criticism of 2016 to inspire new ideas and what to change and add in Eternal. A common criticism he saw was that 2016 was a one-trick pony. It just had arena fights and there wasn't really much else to do other than that. And so in Eternal, the arena fights are there, but they are even more intense, which allowed for more movement, which then allowed developers to add more challenge based on movement in the exploration of the levels. Seriously, the game in between fights can have a lot in common with platformers of all things. And they added swimming sections, which was nice, I guess. But I think it's fair to say that no one who criticised 2016 wanted a Michael Phelps simulator to break up these fights. It is a fair criticism of 2016 to say there could be more going on in between the big fights, and I really appreciate all that was added. I think Eternal as a package is more engaged in 2016 from moment to moment, which again was something that they strived for in the development of the game. The idea was that if you're engaged then you're not bored. So the added difficulty and things going on in between big fights do help a lot with this, but it's a fine line to walk. Downtime is really important too, as if every moment of the game is high intensity action. There's nothing to compare that to, so you get the feeling of no escalation in this action. Downtime can also allow players to take in the world around them a bit more, in between the big moments of carnage, and appreciate the story that is being told to them in this downtime. Now, Doom is not exactly known for its story, outside of
Demons bad you good slay demons please.
And that's not a bad thing. The original Doom 4, 1.0 as they've referred to it, was very story heavy and had similar environments to that found in the military shooter. It also had many NPCs who the player spoke to. So after id and ZeniMax decided not to pursue that idea, how did we end up where we are with 2016's story? And according to the videos on NoClip, the story was the last thing to fall into place. The gameplay was never an issue, but the story was something it just wasn't sure about throughout the development of the game. The team worked for hours on even the first scene of the game. They didn't want tutorials everywhere, or exposition just dumped on players in the starting area. They also didn't want to break the flow of the game by having the story tell you why you hated demons in this world. They dabbled in all those things, and adding more exposition or adding more tutorials never felt right to them. This carried on and on until the team finally made an important decision when they said that this is Doom. The player is here to kill demons. Beyond that, who cares? That's our story. And I think this is probably one of the best decisions that's ever been made. The intro is agonised over by the developers, but because of the time spent trying to get it right, it is one of the most perfect video game intros of all time. It tells you everything you need to know about the story in the game and everything you need to know about its protagonist. The intro goes like this.
They are rage, brutal, without mercy. But you will be worse. Rip and tear, until it is done.
The Slayer awakens and is strapped down. He tears himself away and proceeds to kill a demon by smashing its head to bits with his bare hands. There was a scene showing holograms of people worshipping the coffin you were found in.
We have to contain this.
His armour is sitting waiting for him, surrounded by candles as if it's some holy object. All of this is as cheesy as it gets, let's be honest. And that is the developers letting you know early on what you're in for, and letting you know that you are in full-on action movie mode. There is little sense to what's going on, and a lot of it's ridiculous. But 2016 never pretends like you should really care about any of it. It knows why you're here, and you're here to kill some motherfucking demons. So it made that the story by making the Slayer not give a single shit about anything else but that. His one and only goal is to kill every single demon he finds, no matter what. This could not be made more clear than when the Slayer has a screen pop up in front of his face which starts to spout exposition. And ordinarily in video games you would need to listen to this exposition before moving on so that you know what is going on in the world and the overall story. But the Slayer grabs the screen and forcibly throws it away. This is one of the best moments of show don't tell I've ever seen. It's simultaneously telling us the Slayer does not care what the justification is for all this, and he is not going to listen to this guy's orders, and it's telling us that we should think the exact same as the Slayer. Forget about the story, forget about the reasons, we're here to fuck shit up, and that's all that matters. The whole game is from the Slayer's perspective, so whenever he does show his arms to crack his knuckles or viscerally grab some item, or to slap some poor fucker's disembodied limb onto a scanner to allow him into the next zone, it has so much character to it as you can feel the hatred and disdain he has for the UAC and for Hayden. Take this scene for example.
I'm willing to take full responsibility for the horrible events of the last 24 hours, but you must understand. Our interest in their world was purely for the betterment of mankind. Everything has clearly gotten out of hand now, yes. But it was worth the risk, I assure you.
The Slayer doesn't need a long speech about why he hates what's going on. It's obvious why he's angry. And because Hayden is still trying to justify it to him in this scene, it makes him, and by extension the player, even angrier. These kind of movements from the Slayer's perspective are used frequently in the game, and they're always fantastic.
We're only temporarily disabling the tower. You need to remove each lens individually. Carefully release the hinges.
Warning. Energy contamination detected.
Why?
John Romero has said that the Doom Marine has never had a name beyond Marine, or Doom Guy, as they are supposed to be the player, and this game makes you feel like you are the Slayer in this story. Now, as much as I said earlier that they threw the story away and that it doesn't matter, it would be unfair to say that this game has no story whatsoever. That is far from the truth. It actually has excellent environmental storytelling, and there are loads of codex entries wrote in-world by the UAC, giving lots of lore for those who are looking for it. And the atmosphere is a major part of the story too, as it's dark and brutal, yes, but there is a layer of cheese to it all, which makes you play through the entire game with a smile on your face. This approach got major praise from the press and from the players when it came out, so this is the thing that confuses me the most with the direction of the storytelling in the follow-up. Eternal off the bat will confuse returning players from 2016. I'm not spoiling the end of 2016 here by showing the intro of Eternal, as it has sweet FA to do with 2016. All of a sudden, the Slayer has a pad to go back to. Which is cool, I guess, but how did he get it? Only Ed knows at this point, because I can't find anything about it in-game or on the internet. He just has the universe's most ultimate man cave circling the Earth now. And I know I spoke earlier about downtime, but Eternal has high-octane action every mission with barely any slowing down, but then the pace crashes to a halt when you return to this location between every mission. This is not what I had in mind when I said downtime was important. Anyway, moving on from the Doom Cave, demons have invaded Earth. This doesn't need explaining, but this is the obvious evolution in story from the last game. And you are killing Hell Priests to lower the presence of demons. Okay, no problem. That makes about as much sense as 2016. But then as the game goes on, they try to introduce the Slayer's backstory. And yeah, that's where the game's story falls apart for me. It's the exact style of storytelling that 2016 strives so hard to avoid. All of a sudden there's loads of cutscenes, and although they are all skippable, which the few in 2016 actually weren't, so props for that, they are a tad long and drawn out, and unless you are heavily invested in the lore and read a lot of codex entries, you're not really going to know what's going on. In 2016, not caring was never an issue, but in Eternal you sort of need to fully understand what you're doing and why you're doing it. The atmosphere of the game is way different too. The lighting is not as good as in 2016 in my opinion, but the colours are vibrant, and there is much more variety in the levels, which is good, as 2016 can feel a bit samey in its areas. But there is something I didn't notice until I went back to 2016 from Eternal, as I hadn't played through 2016 since 2016, funnily enough. And that thing is that I am much more immersed in 2016 than I ever was in Eternal. Now, immersion really has become like the most ultimate buzzword in the world, especially if you're into modding Bethesda games. I mean, look at all these mods. They're just ridiculous how many are named... Oh, hang on a minute. Download. Anyway, 2016 had me more engrossed than Eternal ever did. So why is 2016 more immersive? Well, because Doom 2016 wanted to bring Doom into the modern age. Its collectibles are in-world, and they may be Funko Pops, but they are tangible and they exist. They're on the floor like they would be in the real world. Now, I know ammo and health fly out of minions, which isn't realistic, sure, but there are ammo crates too in the world, meaning it is at least trying to be realistic in some of the ways it depicts its world. This adds to the story and the couldn't give a fuck attitude that the Doom Slayer has. The fact that he can produce ammo with his chainsaw and there are real world ammo resources makes him feel like he doesn't care about what's going on so much that he is literally breaking the laws of the universe to accomplish his goals. In 2016 then, the world is real and tangible, and the humour comes from the Slayer being anti it all. He almost operates on cartoon logic in a dark and gritty world. Whereas Eternal is more like the original Dooms, in that it has floating keycards rather than finding them on the bodies of the deceased like in 2016. Ammo and armour is all sorts of brightly coloured and is popping out of enemies left and right. Its hidden collectibles are now flying question marks too. The enemy even have more cartoony sound effects than they used to have. All this, and the Slayer has some hammy backstory that in the original would have been played for laughs by the Slayer walking out mid-sentence as it's being explained to him or something. But in Eternal we are sitting there listening to it all, as if it all matters and it's not ridiculous. I'm not saying there isn't times where the Slayer is still ignoring serious people for laughs.
Access to surface gun bridge granted. Manual loading initiated.
That is a weapon, not a teleporter.
Override loading sequence. Fire. 3, 2, 1.
It's just that there is no denying that the story in the Slayer has got more serious now, but the world we inhabit as the Slayer has become more cartoony, and it just doesn't feel right. The joke is everyone taking things seriously except the Slayer, and now it feels like the Slayer is being taken seriously and the world isn't. The cardinal sin for me, however, is the fact that I no longer feel one with the Slayer. Don't get me wrong, it's nice to see him in the past and to get to learn more about him as a character, and why he is the way he is, but the way in which it was executed was to the detriment of that feeling you get that you are the Slayer yourself. Now, this isn't going to be a deal breaker for all, of course, and you may love the story in this game, and you may love the lore and know everything about it and have read every codex entry. And if you do, that's great. But for me, it's the worst aspect of Eternal. I'd be lying to say anything otherwise. But the fact that I still rank this game as joint top first-person shooter of all time, along with 2016, says a lot about how good I still think Eternal is, despite its shortcomings in its story. For me, the steps forward in gameplay were strides, and I loved the direction that they took in making the gameplay even more fast-paced and challenging. Now, I haven't had a need to mention the music, because to be honest, it's perfect across both games, so there's nothing to critique. But it wouldn't be a Doom video without mentioning how incredible the soundtracks are in both games. Music is usually a background thing that's nice to listen to but never really feels integral to the experience. But without Mick Gordon's incredible soundtracks, I'm seriously not sure these games would be the masterpieces of first-person shooting action that they are. Every note feels tailor-made for the actions on screen, and I want it on record that I think they are vital to why both games are incredible. So in conclusion, are both these games Doom? Of course they are, they're both called fucking Doom. And they're both made by the same incredible company that made the originals, and you can feel the love and dedication the team has put into both. But having said that, after replaying both, and looking into others' opinions online, and the research on what was trying to be accomplished with these games, I can understand the divide. It comes down to what you're looking for in these games and what you expect from the series. If you're a massive fan of 2016 for the way it handled its story, then you may not like Eternal all that much. On the flip side, now you've played Eternal, going back to 2016, you can feel like you're going through thick mud when compared to how fast you are in Eternal, and the core gameplay loop is not as satisfying compared to the multitude of options given in the follow-up. I'm not here to say that one is better than the other, as I genuinely believe them both to be masterpieces, made by an incredible studio who knows exactly how to make an almost perfect shooter. And all of this is just my opinion, so yes, I can recommend one over the other depending on what you expect from this legendary series. But if all you expect from these games is to have a smile on your face throughout, then I can happily recommend you do yourselves a favour and play them both.